Park Do-hwan stood alone in the cockpit of his small ship, watching the dead station grow larger through the viewport. The pale dawn hung in the darkness like a forgotten giant, its hull scarred by 60 years of cosmic dust and neglect. Once, this station had been home to 2,000 beings from a dozen different species. Now it was nothing but a tomb drifting through empty space. Do-hwan was 38 years old, with gray streaks already showing in his short black hair. His face carried the hard lines of a man who had seen too much death. 10 years ago, he had been a sergeant in the Republic of Korea Space Marines. He had led his squad through the worst fighting of the Titan insurgency. He had watched every single one of them die in a boarding action gone wrong. The military gave him medals and called him a hero. He called himself a survivor of his own failure. After his discharge, he became a salvager. It was lonely work, perfect for a man who no longer trusted himself to lead others. He would find abandoned ships and stations, claim legal rights to them, restore what he could, and sell them for profit. It kept him busy. It kept him away from people. Most importantly, it kept him from thinking too much about the past. The pale dawn was his biggest claim yet. He had won the salvage rights in a heated auction, somehow outbidding 3 major corporations. The station had been officially abandoned after what the records called a catastrophic decompression event. All crew lost. No survivors. The Galactic Cooperative, which was the alliance of 12 spacefaring species that governed most of known space, had sealed the station and left it to rot. But Do-hwan had heard rumors in the dark corners of salvager bars. Some said the pale dawn was not abandoned because of an accident. Some said something happened there that the cooperative wanted forgotten. Do-hwan did not believe in rumors, but he did believe in profit. A station this size, properly restored, would set him up for life. He docked his vessel, which he had named the Patient Hand, at the main airlock. The seal was old but still functional. He cycled through and stepped into darkness. His helmet light cut through the black, revealing a corridor frozen in time. Dust hung motionless in the zero gravity. Personal belongings floated gently in the stillness. A child's toy drifted past his face, a small stuffed creature from some alien world. Do-hwan pushed it aside and moved deeper into the station. The work began. For 3 weeks, Do-hwan labored alone. He sealed hull breaches with emergency patches. He reactivated life support systems one section at a time. He restored power to the main reactor, working carefully to avoid triggering any fail-safes that might see the whole station explode. It was hard, exhausting work, but he was good at it. The station slowly came back to life around him. On the 18th day, he reached the central computer core. This was the heart of any station, the place where all information was stored. If he could restore the computer systems, he could access maintenance logs, structural reports, and everything else he needed to complete the restoration efficiently. The core powered up with a hum that vibrated through the deck plates. Do-hwan connected his personal terminal and began accessing files. What he found made him stop cold. The data was corrupted, not by time or decay, but by deliberate deletion. Someone had systematically destroyed specific files, targeting them with precision while leaving others intact. Maintenance logs were complete. Crew rosters were complete. But everything related to research projects on Deck 7, the Xenobiology Wing, had been wiped clean. Do-hwan sat back in his chair and thought about this. In his experience, people only destroyed information when they had something to hide. The question was whether he wanted to know what that something was. He decided he did. Deck 7 was sealed behind emergency bulkheads. The station's computer listed it as structurally compromised, but when Do-hwan ran his own scans, he found the structure was perfectly sound. Someone had sealed this deck and did not want anyone entering. It took him 2 days to override the locks. When the bulkhead finally slid open, He stepped into a corridor that looked exactly like every other corridor on the station. Clean, empty, dead. He searched methodically, room by room, laboratories filled with equipment he did not recognize, storage units containing samples that had long since decayed. Everything looked abandoned but normal. Then he found the wall. It was in a small laboratory at the far end of the deck. The wall looked solid, but his scanner showed a hollow space behind it. Do-Won ran his hands along the surface until he found the hidden release. The wall slid aside, revealing a chamber that should not exist. Inside were 12 stasis pods. Do-Won stood frozen, his helmet light playing over the pods. They were arranged in 2 neat rows, each one humming softly with independent power. Through the frosted glass covers, he could see shapes, bodies, living beings, held in suspended animation for what must have been 60 years. He moved closer to the nearest pod and wiped the frost from the glass. The face that looked back at him was not human. It was not any species he had ever seen or heard of. The skin was pale blue-gray. The features were humanoid, but subtly wrong, like a reflection in imperfect water. The eyes were closed, but he had the strange feeling that they would hold starlight if they opened. Do-Won checked the pod's status display. The life signs were weak, but stable. However, the power cells were failing. These pods had been running on emergency reserves for decades, and those reserves were nearly exhausted. According to his calculations, the pods would fail completely within weeks, maybe days. He checked all 12. They were all the same. 12 unknown aliens slowly dying in their hidden chamber. Do-Won sat down on the cold deck and tried to think. He should report this. He should contact the Cooperative authorities and let them handle it. That was the legal thing to do, the safe thing to do. But someone had hidden these beings here. Someone had sealed this deck and erased all records of its research. Someone had wanted these 12 aliens to remain secret, even if it meant letting them die in the dark. Do-Won thought about his squad, about the men and women he had failed to save on Titan. He thought about the years he had spent running from that failure, hiding in the emptiness of space. He could not watch 12 beings die when he had the power to save them. He did not know who they were. He did not know why they were hidden. He did not know what waking them might bring down upon his head. But Park Do-Won had been a Marine. Marines did not leave people behind. He stood up, walked to the first pod, and began the revival sequence. The first one woke screaming. Do-Won had expected confusion. He had expected fear. He had not expected the raw terror that tore from the alien's throat as the stasis pod opened. The sound was not quite human, carrying notes that made his bones ache. The alien thrashed against the pod's restraints, eyes wild with panic. Those strange eyes that did indeed hold something like starlight within their depths. Do-Won held up his hands and spoke slowly. He did not know if the alien could understand him, but tone mattered more than words in moments like this. He kept his voice calm and steady, the way he had once spoken to wounded soldiers in the chaos of battle. It took nearly an hour for the alien to stop fighting. When it finally lay still, chest heaving with exhaustion, Do-Won offered water. The alien stared at the container for a long moment, then reached out with a 4-fingered hand and drank. Do-Won repeated this process 11 more times over the next 3 days. Each awakening was difficult in its own way. Some of the aliens woke silently, staring at him with expressions he could not read. Others wept. One tried to attack him, moving with a speed that surprised him despite his training. He managed to restrain it without causing injury, and eventually it calmed. The last one to wake was different from the others. She and Do-Won somehow knew immediately that this one was female, opened her eyes with complete awareness. There was no confusion, no fear. She looked at him as if she had been expecting him, as if she had somehow known he would come. She was their leader. That became clear within minutes of her waking. The others gathered around her, speaking in a language that sounded like wind through crystal chimes. She listened to them, then turned to face Do Hwan. She spoke, and to his amazement he understood her. The words were accented strangely, but they were his language, Korean. "You woke us," she said. "Why?" Do Hwan did not know how to answer that question. He settled for honesty. "Your pods were failing. You would have died." "Many would prefer we had." She studied him with those starlight eyes, and Do Hwan felt as if she was looking directly into his soul. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once, then turned to address her people in their chiming language. When she turned back to him, her expression had softened slightly. "I am called Yuna now," she said. "It is a name from your tongue. My true name cannot be spoken by your voice. You are Do Hwan, the one who restored this place." "How do you know my name?" "The station speaks to us. We can hear its systems. We know much about you, Do Hwan of Earth. You were a warrior. You carry great pain." Do Hwan felt his jaw tighten. "The station doesn't have records about me." "Not in words, in patterns. The way you move through corridors, the care you take in repairs, the rhythm of your breathing when you sleep. We are very old, Do Hwan. We have learned to read such things." He did not know how to respond to that, so he asked the question that had been burning in his mind since he found them. "What are you? Why were you hidden here?" Yuna was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with sorrow. "We call ourselves the Hanul. It is not our original name. Our language is too different from yours. But Hanul is close in meaning. It means sky, heaven, the place from which we came. I've never heard of your species. You're not in any cooperative database." "No, we would not be." Yuna sat down on the edge of her pod, suddenly looking very tired despite her ageless face. "The Cooperative erased us from history. They tried to erase us from existence. What you see here, these 12, we are all that remain of a civilization that once spanned 100 worlds." Do Hwan felt cold spread through his chest. "What do you mean, erased?" "Genocide," Yuna said simply. "Complete and systematic. It took them 12 years to hunt us across the galaxy, 12 years to murder billions of my people. When it was done, they wiped every record. They made it so we had never existed at all." Do Hwan wanted to deny this. The Galactic Cooperative was not perfect, but it maintained peace across known space. It had welcomed humanity into the galactic community less than 2 centuries ago. The idea that it could orchestrate genocide was impossible to accept. But he had seen the deleted files. He had seen the sealed deck. He had seen 12 beings hidden away like shameful secrets. "Why?" he asked. "Why would they do this?" Yuna was quiet for a long time before answering. During the following weeks, as Do Hwan continued his restoration work with the Hanul's help, she revealed the truth piece by piece. It was as if she needed time to decide how much to trust him, or perhaps as if the memories were too painful to share all at once. The Hanul had been an ancient civilization. They had traveled the stars for thousands of years before the Cooperative's founding species had even developed basic tools. When they finally made contact with the Cooperative 112 years ago, they had done so with open hands and peaceful intentions. They had also carried proof. During their long history, the Hanul had documented the true origins of the Cooperative's 3 founding species. They had records showing that these species had not risen to power through wisdom or diplomacy. They had risen through murder. 17 other species had been systematically destroyed over millennia, their histories erased, their peoples exterminated. The Hanul, believing in truth above all else, had offered to share this knowledge freely. They thought it would lead to reform, to justice. Instead, the Cooperative's inner council had voted for their complete destruction. Do Juan listened to this history while rewiring power conduits with Yuna at his side. The Hanul worked alongside him now, their technical knowledge far beyond anything he had encountered. They restored systems in hours that would have taken him weeks. They seemed grateful for the work, as if staying busy helped them not think about all they had lost. On the day he finally accessed a corrupted data fragment from the station's deep archives, Do Juan saw the proof for himself. Video recordings of cooperative strike teams destroying Hanul colonies. Audio logs of council meetings where the genocide was discussed in calm, bureaucratic terms. Death tolls measured in billions. The Pale Dawn had been a secret refuge, hidden by sympathizers within the Cooperative who believed the genocide was wrong. These sympathizers called themselves the Truth Keepers. They had smuggled Hanul survivors to safe locations across the galaxy. But the Cooperative had found this station. The accident that killed the crew was no accident. It was an execution. The strike team had somehow missed the hidden chamber, missed the 12 survivors sleeping in the dark. Do Juan stood in the restored observation deck, staring out at the stars. Yuna stood beside him, her blue-gray skin pale in the starlight. "Now you know," she said quietly. "Now you must decide what to do with this knowledge." Do Juan thought about everything he had believed about the galaxy. He thought about his years of service to humanity's place within the Cooperative. He thought about the 12 survivors who had trusted him with their lives and their truth. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I know I won't abandon you. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Yuna placed her four-fingered hand on his arm. "You humans," she said, "you are very strange, very stubborn." "We prefer persistent," Do Juan replied. For the first time since her awakening, Yuna smiled. The message came on a Tuesday, though days meant little in the endless dark of space. Do Juan was repairing a navigation array when his communication console lit up with an automated alert. A cooperative patrol vessel had entered the system. It was heading directly for the Pale Dawn. He found Yuna in the hydroponics bay, teaching two younger Hanul how to coax life from the ancient growing systems. When he told her about the patrol, her face went perfectly still. "How long?" she asked. 6 hours until they reach communication range. 8 until they can dock. Then we have 8 hours to decide who lives and who dies." Do Juan had spent 3 months with the Hanul now. He had come to know them as individuals, not just refugees. There was Minho, who had been an engineer on a Hanul colony ship and who worked beside Do Juan each day with gentle patience. There was Somi, barely an adult by Hanul standards, who had been in stasis since she was a child and was now learning about a galaxy that had changed beyond recognition. There was old Taeyang, who rarely spoke, but sometimes sang in the evenings, his voice carrying melodies from a dead world. Do Juan could not let them die. "Tell me everything," he said to Yuna. "Everything you have held back. I need to understand what we are truly facing." They sat in the observation deck as Yuna finally revealed the full truth. The Truth Keepers, the secret alliance that had hidden the Hanul here, were not a small group of rebels. They had members in every species of the Cooperative, even among the founding species themselves. For over a century, they had worked in shadows, preserving the truth and waiting for the right moment to reveal it. But the Cooperative's inner council was always watching. They had hunters dedicated to finding and eliminating any trace of the Hanul or the historical records that proved their crimes. The Truth Keepers had lost hundreds of members over the decades. Their numbers were dwindling. "Humans joined the Truth Keepers 50 years ago," Yuna said. "Your species was new to the Cooperative then, still finding your place. Some of your people learned the truth and could not accept it. They became our most dedicated allies." "Why humans specifically?" Yuna smiled sadly. "Because you are young. Because you have not been shaped by centuries of cooperative lies." And because there is something in your species that refuses to accept injustice quietly. The Hanul were like that once, before we became too peaceful, too trusting. Do Juan thought about this. He thought about human history, about all the times his people had fought against oppression and tyranny. They did not always win. They were not always right. But they never stopped trying. The patrol, he said. What happens when they find you? If they recognize us, they will execute us immediately. They will destroy this station and everyone aboard. Your death will be listed as an accident, just like the original crew. And if they don't recognize you? We are not in any database. To them, we would appear as an unknown species, unregistered refugees discovered in salvage. Standard protocol would require them to take us into custody for identification, which would eventually lead to recognition and execution. Yes, more slowly, but the result would be the same. Do Juan stood and walked to the viewport. The stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the patrol ship was closing in. There is a third option, he said slowly, one that depends entirely on human unpredictability. He outlined his plan. It was not complicated. It relied on bureaucracy, on paperwork, on the simple fact that the Cooperative was a massive organization where things moved slowly and procedures had to be followed. Most importantly, it relied on the patrol commander being the kind of person who might listen. It will not work, Yuna said. You are asking them to ignore their training, their loyalty, everything they believe. I am asking them to look at evidence with their own eyes. I am asking them to think for themselves. Humans are good at that, even when it gets us in trouble. The patrol arrived on schedule. Do Juan watched their ship approach on the station's external cameras. It was a standard cooperative vessel, crewed by a mix of species but commanded by a human. Commander Baek Ji-won, according to the identification signal. Korean, like himself. He met her at the airlock personally. Commander Ji-won was younger than he expected, perhaps 30 years old, with sharp eyes and a posture that spoke of military training. She looked at him with immediate suspicion. Park Do-hwan, she said, reading from a tablet. Former Marine, honorable discharge, registered salvager. You've been living alone on this station for 4 months. Not entirely alone, Do-hwan replied. He gave her a tour. He showed her everything, including the Hanul. He introduced them as unregistered refugees he had discovered in stasis, which was technically true. He filed formal paperwork requesting species identification assistance, which was proper protocol. He acted as if he had nothing to hide. Ji-won was clearly thrown off balance. She had expected to find a salvager cutting corners, maybe smuggling goods on the side. She had not expected 12 unknown aliens being presented openly for official processing. You should have reported this immediately, she said. Unregistered aliens are a serious matter. I reported as soon as I had communication systems restored. The bureaucratic forms were quite complicated. I wanted to make sure I filled them out correctly. Ji-won gave him a look that suggested she did not believe him for a moment. But there was nothing she could do. He had followed procedure, filed papers, and requested assistance. Killing 12 unknown aliens without authorization would create exactly the kind of paperwork nightmare that made cooperative officers' lives miserable. Before she left to consult with her superiors, Do-hwan pressed a data chip into her hand. Commander, he said quietly, before you make your report, you should look at this, not as an officer, as a human being. She stared at the chip, then at him. What is this? The truth. I hope you can handle it. Ji-won returned to her ship. For 2 days, Do-hwan waited. The Hanul waited with him, saying little, preparing themselves for whatever would come. On the 3rd day, Ji-won came back. She came alone, without her crew, wearing civilian clothes instead of her uniform. Her face was pale and her eyes were red, as if she had not slept. She found Do-hwan in the observation deck. I watched it all, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. The recordings, the council meetings, the death counts. I watched our leaders discuss the murder of billions like they were talking about budget allocations. I know, Do-Wan said. Everything I have dedicated my life to serving is built on mass graves. Ji-Wan's hands were shaking. My grandmother served the Cooperative. My mother served. I have served since I was 18 years old. And it was all a lie. Do-Wan could have said many things. He could have tried to comfort her, to soften the blow. Instead, he spoke the words that had been forming in his mind for months. Then we build something new. Ji-Wan looked at him with eyes full of pain and confusion. How? The Cooperative spans hundreds of worlds. They have fleets, armies, control over everything. We are 2 humans and 12 aliens on a salvaged station. We start small. We gather evidence. We find others who have seen the truth and refuse to accept it. The Truth Keepers have been working for a century. We join them. We carry their work forward. They will hunt us. They will kill everyone we care about. Probably. But consider the alternative. We stay silent. We let them continue. More species die. More history gets erased. Eventually, they will decide that humans are a threat too, and then it will be our turn. Ji-Wan was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. My crew thinks I went down to the station to conduct a final inspection. If I file a report saying this station is structurally compromised and should be demolished, they will leave. They will expect the station to be destroyed remotely within the week. And you? I can fake a shuttle accident. It would not be difficult. Baek Ji-Wan dies and someone new takes her place. Someone who can move through cooperative space without suspicion. That is a lot to sacrifice. Ji-Wan looked out at the stars, at the darkness between them. My grandmother used to tell me that the measure of a person is what they do when no one is watching, when they have to choose between safety and truth. She turned to face him. I know what I have to do. The question is whether you can use me. Do-Wan extended his hand. Welcome to the Forbidden Alliance, Commander. Ji-Wan took it. 3 days later, her crew departed. They never noticed that their commander's shuttle had returned to the station after launching. They never noticed that Baek Ji-Wan was still alive. The Pale Dawn was no longer a graveyard. It was becoming something else entirely. 6 months had passed since Ji-Wan faked her death. The Pale Dawn had transformed from a salvage project into something that would have terrified the Cooperative if they had known it existed. Do-Wan stood in the restored command center, watching data streams flow across multiple screens. Reports came in from across the galaxy through encrypted channels so complex that even cooperative intelligence could not crack them. The Truth Keepers had been working in shadows for a century, but they had never had a central headquarters. Now, they did. The station hummed with activity. Do-Wan had used his salvager contacts carefully, bringing in humans he trusted absolutely. Old Marines who had served with him and knew how to keep secrets. Engineers who asked few questions. People who had their own reasons to distrust the Cooperative, but had never known where to direct that distrust. Then there were the others. Members of 8 different species had made their way to the Pale Dawn over the past months. Each one had learned the truth somehow and refused to accept it. A young pilot from the Ven species, whose grandmother had told stories of a massacre that official history claimed never happened. A scientist from the Korath, who had found evidence of genetic tampering in her own species' past. An elderly diplomat from the founding species themselves who had discovered council records that should have been destroyed centuries ago. They came quietly, 1 or 2 at a time. They left their old lives behind. They joined the growing resistance. Ji-Wan had become their eyes and ears within cooperative space. Using forged identities and her intimate knowledge of cooperative systems, she moved from world to world gathering intelligence. She had contacts in military installations, in government offices, in places that should have been impossible to infiltrate. She sent back information that helped the Truth Keepers avoid cooperative hunters and plan their moves carefully. But it was Yuna and the Hanul who provided the true advantage. Their technology was centuries beyond anything the Cooperative possessed. Not weapons, as the Hanul had been a peaceful people, but communications, computing, and most importantly, data storage. The Hanul could hold entire libraries and devices the size of a fingernail. They could transmit information across light years without any signal that cooperative scanners could detect. Dowan found Yuna in her quarters one evening, staring at a holographic image of a world he did not recognize. Blue oceans, green continents, 2 moons hanging in a purple sky. "Home?" he asked. "What remains of it? The Cooperative destroyed the surface, but the world still exists. Empty now. A memorial that no one visits." Dohwan sat beside her. In 6 months, they had developed an understanding that went beyond words. She was ancient by human standards, having lived for over 300 years before the stasis. He was young and broken in his own ways. Somehow, they fit together. "We received word from Jiwan today," he said. "She found something important. A derelict ship, very old, drifting in a dead system. It matched coordinates in your historical records." Yuna turned to look at him. "The Watchers." "She thinks so. She sent preliminary scans. The ship is intact, and there appears to be a functioning database inside." The Watchers were legends even among the Hanul. They were said to be a species that had existed long before any current civilization, perhaps 50,000 years ago. They had not conquered or expanded. They had simply watched, documenting everything they observed with perfect accuracy. When they eventually vanished, they left their records scattered across the galaxy in hidden locations. The Hanul had found 3 Watcher caches during their long history. The information within had confirmed their suspicions about the Cooperative's founding species, but those caches had been destroyed during the genocide. If this ship was real, if its database was intact, it could contain evidence far more comprehensive than anything the Truth Keepers currently possessed. "We need to recover it," Yuna said. "But it will be dangerous. The Cooperative monitors that region." "I know. I am going myself." "You cannot risk yourself. You are too important to what we are building here." Dowan smiled. It was not a happy smile. "I am a salvager. Recovering derelict ships is literally what I do. Besides, if something goes wrong, the Resistance survives. You have trained others to lead. Jiwan knows everything I know. The Pale Dawn will continue with or without me." Yuna studied him with those starlight eyes. "You still carry guilt, Dowan, for your soldiers who died. You think that by risking yourself, you are somehow paying a debt." "Maybe. Or maybe I am just stubborn." "Persistent," she corrected. "That too." The recovery mission took 3 weeks. Dowan went with a small crew of 4, including Minho the Hanul engineer and 2 humans who had been with him since the beginning. They found the Watcher ship exactly where Jiwan had reported it, a massive vessel of strange design that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Getting inside was the first challenge. The ship had no airlocks that matched any known species. Eventually, Minho found a way in through what might have been an emergency hatch, using Hanul technology to interface with systems that had been dormant for 50 millennia. The interior was vast and silent. The corridors were built for beings much larger than humans or Hanul, with ceilings that vanished into darkness above. There were no bodies, no personal effects, nothing to indicate what the Watchers had looked like or what had happened to them. But there was the database. It filled an entire chamber, crystalline structures pulsing with soft light. Minho interfaced with it carefully, downloading information into Hanul's storage devices. The process took 4 days, When it was complete, they had more data than the Truth Keepers had ever possessed. The journey back to the Pale Dawn was tense. Every scanner contact made Do-Hwan's heart race, but they were not detected. Whatever luck had protected them so far continued to hold. When they finally docked and Do-Hwan presented the data to the assembled Truth Keepers, the chamber fell silent. The Watchers had documented everything, the rise and fall of hundreds of species over 50,000 years. The expansion of the 3 founding species from their homeworld, their systematic elimination of any civilization that might challenge their dominance, 17 species exterminated before the Hanul. The exact methods used, the exact death tolls, the exact council votes that had authorized each genocide. But there was more. The Watchers had also documented patterns. They had analyzed the founding species' behavior across millennia and had developed predictions for the future. According to their calculations, the founding species did not simply eliminate threats. They eliminated potential. Any species that showed signs of eventually surpassing them would be targeted for destruction. The Hanul had been first on that list when they were discovered. Their advancement had been too obvious to ignore. But the Watchers had identified another species that would eventually reach the same level. A young species, violent and chaotic, but possessing a unique combination of adaptability and determination. A species that, if left alone, would surpass the founding species within 2 centuries. Humans. Yuna looked at Do-Hwan across the silent chamber. "Now you understand," she said softly. "We are not just fighting for the Hanul or for historical justice. We are fighting for your species' survival. The Cooperative has not moved against humanity yet, because you are still young, still useful, but the moment you become too advanced, too independent, too powerful, they will do to you what they did to us." Do-Hwan felt the weight of this knowledge settle onto his shoulders. It was one thing to fight for truth and justice in the abstract. It was another to know that his entire species was scheduled for extermination. He looked around the chamber at the faces watching him. Humans, Hanul, members of 8 other species who had risked everything to be here. They were all looking to him for a response. "Then we make sure that moment never comes," he said. "We expose the truth before they can act. We build alliances. We prepare. We do what humans have always done when someone tries to destroy us." "What is that?" asked a young human who had joined just weeks ago. Do-Hwan smiled, and this time there was iron in it. "We survive, we fight, and we never, ever give up." The chamber erupted in voices, planning, arguing, organizing. The resistance had a new purpose now. They were not just preserving history, they were fighting for the future. 5 years had passed since Do-Hwan had found the dying Hanul in their hidden pods. The Pale Dawn was no longer recognizable as the derelict station he had claimed through a salvage auction. It had become a city in space, a hidden headquarters where beings from a dozen species worked together toward a single goal. The Truth Keepers had grown beyond anything their founders could have imagined. They had cells on every major cooperative world, members in every branch of government and military. They had been preparing for years, gathering evidence, building networks, waiting for the right moment. That moment had finally arrived. Do-Hwan stood in the newly constructed war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. Yuna was at his side, unchanged by the years, her starlight eyes focused on the data streaming before them. Ji-Wan was present via secure transmission, her face older and harder than the young commander who had first boarded the station. "The transmission nodes are in position," Ji-Wan reported. "All 347 of them. When we activate, every public broadcast system in cooperative space will carry our message simultaneously." "And the Watcher data?" Do-Hwan asked. "Compressed and attached. Anyone who receives the broadcast will be able to access the complete historical record. Every genocide, every cover-up, every vote to murder billions. They were calling it Operation Pale Dawn. It was the largest coordinated action in the Resistance's history. In one moment, they would expose a century of lies to trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. There would be consequences. The Cooperative would not take this quietly. There would be violence, chaos, civil unrest. Some of their people would die, possibly many of them. But the alternative was silence. The alternative was waiting for the founding species to decide that humanity's time had come. The alternative was another genocide, another erasure, another species forgotten by history. "Everyone is in position," Minho reported from the communications console. He had become their chief technical officer over the years, his gentle nature hiding a brilliant mind. "Awaiting your order." Dowan looked at Yuna. She nodded once, a small movement that carried the weight of everything her people had lost. "Transmit," he said. The signal went out. Across the galaxy, screens flickered. Broadcasts were interrupted. Emergency frequencies came to life, and suddenly everyone was watching. Dowan's recorded face appeared on billions of devices. He had written this message dozens of times, searching for the right words. "My name is Park Do-hwan. I am a human, a former Marine, and a citizen of the Galactic Cooperative. What I am about to tell you will be difficult to hear. Many of you will not believe it. That is why I am providing evidence that cannot be denied. For over 1,000 years, the three founding species of the Cooperative have maintained their power through systematic genocide. 17 species have been exterminated before they could challenge the founders' dominance. All records of their existence have been erased. You have been living in a galaxy built on mass graves. The Hanul were the most recent victims, destroyed 112 years ago. 12 of them survived, hidden by members of a secret resistance called the Truth Keepers. I found them on an abandoned station. They shared their evidence with me. Attached to this broadcast is the complete historical archive of a species called the Watchers, who documented everything before their own disappearance 50,000 years ago. You will find records of every genocide. You will find council votes. You will find death counts in the billions. You will also find predictions. According to Watcher analysis, the founding species will eventually target humanity for the same fate. We are scheduled to be exterminated once we become too advanced to control. I am not asking you to start a war. I am asking you to demand the truth. I am asking you to remember the species that died so the founders could maintain their power. I am asking you to help us build a galaxy where this never happens again. We are the Truth Keepers. We have been watching over this knowledge for a century, waiting for the right moment to share it. That moment is now. Look at the evidence, make your own judgment, and then decide what kind of galaxy you want to live in. The recording ended. The data files began downloading on every device that had received the signal. For a long moment, the war room was silent. Then Minho spoke, his voice carrying an edge of wonder. The network traffic is overwhelming every metric we have. Billions of beings accessing the files simultaneously. Cooperative military frequencies are going insane, Jiwon reported. They are trying to jam the signal, but it has already spread too far. Local authorities on at least 40 worlds are reporting civil disturbances. Do-hwan sat down heavily in his command chair. He had done what he set out to do. Whatever came next was beyond his control. The next few months were chaos. Some worlds fell into violence as populations turned on cooperative authorities. Others experienced peaceful mass protests that brought governments to a standstill. The founding species tried to deny everything, calling the Truth Keepers terrorists and the evidence fabricated. But the Watcher data was too comprehensive, too detailed, too impossible to fake. Cracks appeared within the Cooperative itself. Member species demanded investigations. Military commanders refused orders. Entire sectors declared neutrality, waiting to see how the crisis would resolve. The founders made their move. A cooperative fleet was dispatched to the Pale Dawn's location, having finally tracked their transmissions despite all precautions. 300 warships against a single station. They found the station empty. Do-Wan had evacuated everyone weeks earlier, scattering the Truth Keepers across a dozen hidden locations. The Pale Dawn was a decoy now, one final message from a resistance that had learned to survive. When the cooperative fleet arrived, they found the station's reactors set to overload. They barely escaped before the explosion lit up the system brighter than its star. The war lasted 3 years. It was not truly a war of weapons, though battles were fought and people died. It was a war of information, of organization, of slowly building alliances that the founding species could not break. In the end, it was not the Truth Keepers who brought down the old order. It was the Cooperative's own members. Species that had been content with their place in the hierarchy began demanding answers. Military officers who had served loyally for decades refused to fire on civilians. Politicians who had supported the founders found themselves abandoned by their own people. The founding species representatives were arrested by their own security forces. They stood trial on charges of genocide and crimes against sentient life. The evidence was undeniable. The verdict was unanimous. 50 years after Do-Wan had first set foot on the Pale Dawn, a reformed Galactic Council convened for the first time. Representatives from every species sat together as equals. The founding species were present, not as rulers, but as defendants, still facing justice. Do-Wan was there, though he was old now, sitting in a hover chair with Yuna at his side. She had not aged at all in the decades they had spent together, but she held his wrinkled hand as if time meant nothing. At the speaker's podium stood a young woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. Her name was Park Minji, Do-Wan's granddaughter, born and raised on various hidden stations throughout the resistance years. She had become a symbol of the new generation, those who had grown up knowing the truth. "We are gathered here today to acknowledge the crimes of the past," Minji said, her voice carrying across the vast chamber and broadcast to billions watching across the galaxy. For too long, history was written by those who committed atrocities. For too long, entire species were erased so that others could maintain power. That ends now. She read the charges. She presented the evidence. She spoke the names of the 17 destroyed species, including the Hanul, giving voice to civilizations that had been silenced for millennia. Beside Do-Wan, Yuna wept silently. Not from sadness, though sadness was there. She wept because her people would finally be remembered. "The road ahead will not be easy," Minji continued. "Trust must be rebuilt. Institutions must be reformed. We must prove that we can be better than those who came before. But I believe we can do this. I believe that beings of all species, working together with honesty and courage, can build a galaxy worth living in." She paused, looking directly at the camera, directly at the billions watching. "My grandfather taught me that humans are persistent. We do not give up when facing impossible odds. We do not stay quiet when we see injustice. We do not forget those who have been wronged." She smiled, and Do-Wan saw his own stubbornness reflected in that smile. "Today, we prove him right." The gavel fell. The trial began. Do-Wan leaned back in his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 88 years. He had been a Marine, a salvager, a rebel, and a leader. Now he was simply an old man watching the future unfold. Yuna squeezed his hand. "You humans," she said softly, echoing words she had spoken to him decades ago. "You really are too stubborn to die quietly." Do-Wan smiled one final time. "Persistent," he corrected. "We prefer persistent." Through the vast windows of the council chamber, the stars shone brightly. Somewhere out there, new civilizations were rising, species that would never know the fear of genocide. The galaxy had been broken for a very long time. Now, at last, it was beginning to heal.